Support for Trifles comes from listeners like you, who support us through Patreon and Substack. Bonus material, thank you gifts, and more await at patreon.com/trifles and at trifles.substack.com. And now you can enjoy some Trifles swag, mugs, notepads, and oval stickers, available in our store. Find it at ihearofsherlock.com/merchandise.
Welcome to Trifles, a weekly podcast about the Sherlock Holmes stories.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Yes, the lodger was veiled, the face was yellow, and the valley was fearsome, but there are so many other details to pick apart in the stories.
Pray, be precise as to details.
You know the plots, but what about the minutiae? Have you ever stopped to wonder what kind of medical practice Dr. Watson actually ran? Or about the number of Holmes's monographs? Or how much the rent was at 221B Baker Street?
You are very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes.
It is my business to know what other people don't know.
Scott Monty and Burt Wolder will have the answers to these questions and more in Trifles.
The game's afoot.
Episode 496, Holmes Alone. Well, hi there, and welcome to Trifles, the Sherlock Holmes podcast, where we get into the minutiae in the Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Burt Wolder.
And Burt, you do have supervision there at home, don't you?
I do have supervision. In fact, I can just glance out my window and see Stamford, Connecticut. It's amazing. The skies are so clear, but there's a little traffic on Interstate 95 going north today, friends, and you might want to find another alternate route.
I'm calling your bluff because there is always traffic on 95.
Well, then it's not much
You
of a
clearly
bluff,
do not have
is it?
supervision.
It's not much of a bluff, is it?
No. Well, that's not quite the supervision I was talking about, but still, we are not, good for folks at home to know, we are not talking about Superman, nor are we talking about Macaulay Culkin, trapped in a house with thieves trying to get in. This is the monthly feature where we look at a Morley Montgomery Award-winning article in the Baker Street Journal. That is an article that has risen above all of its counterparts to be selected as the best piece of scholarship of the year in the Baker Street Journal. And we are now up to 2009. And we have a piece from the spring 2009 issue of the Baker Street Journal, volume 59, number 1, called Holmes Alone, Glimpses of Post-Watson Baker Street in the Mazarin Stone by Marshall, known to his friends as Mike Burdan.
Yes, we do.
What does Mike have to say about Baker Street in this time? Well, stay tuned. If you'd like to support us in any way, you can do that. We give you a variety of ways. You can do it on Patreon, you can do it on Substack, or you can do it through our merch store, where you can get Trifles notepads and Trifles mugs, as well as some oval stickers for your car, your refrigerator, your laptop, wherever you stick stickers. Excuse me. And of course, on Patreon and Substack, both of those options give you the opportunity to listen to the show without ads, uninterrupted, uninterred. We wish you to support us in any manner that works for you, whether it's a one-time donation. You can even select just 1 month from Patreon or Substack. You don't have to commit to the full year. But if you do commit to the full year, you get a discount. So check those out and see what works for you and explore what it looks like with other Sherlockian members of that community. Oh, and also, I should mention that all of our supporters at any level are automatically entered into a raffle. Once a month we do a drawing, and we select a name at random to receive a back issue of the Baker Street Journal. And since we neglected that activity in the last episode, we're going to get to it at the end of this one. So stay tuned. Okay, Bert, we find ourselves all the way back in 2009. Oh. Such heady times.
Yeah, those were the days.
Those were the days, yeah. So, Marshall Burden, we've had Mike on I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere before. I think he was episode 2 or 3, something along those lines. Very early on.
Well, we have to have him back. See what he's doing.
We do. Well, in the meantime, we have him here at Trifles, which is a nice treat. Yeah, he was episode 3 on I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. He's a fascinating freelance writer, and he's contributed a number of pieces of scholarship to the Baker Street Journal over the years. And he's just a fascinating person to spend time with and to speak with. So where does Mike land us with Holmes Alone?
Well, he does a number of interesting things here. And, of course, he's touching on a sore subject for many Sherlockians, which is Mazarin Stone, which is not apparently, when you look at it and come across it in the canon, written by Watson. And so there are a lot of questions about this thing, like who wrote it and what's going on here. And when I say he does a number of interesting things, he begins in his first paragraph with one that I really admire from the standpoint of somebody who reads a good deal of Sherlockian scholarship. And I'll tell you what it is in a second. He says, of the 60 adventures that comprise the canon, none is apt to put Sherlockians in a more disputatious mood than Mazarin Stone. So widespread is the debate over the genesis and authenticity of this particular narrative that anything even approaching a consensus is a foregone impossibility. Everyone, from Billy the Page, number 1 or 2, to the first, second, or possibly even third Mrs. Watson, has been credited with authoring this problematic tale, which many scholars summarily dismiss as non-canonical. And here's where Mike does something that I really admire. He puts, at the end of that opening paragraph, a footnote. And that takes you to an endnote where he's listed all of that, where anybody else would have put it into the opening and dragged out the lead and made this hard to pursue. And I have to quote from his endnote number 1 here. He says, look, the reasons for this in his endnote, he says, are many. Its arrogant, provocative dialogue has been cited as unworthy of Holmes. Its plotline, while exhibiting Holmes's cleverness, downplays the deductive ratiocination that we've come to expect of him, and we fail to see Holmes hard at work. In fact, all he has to do is to trick Count Negretto Silvius, who has very conveniently brought the crown diamond with him to the interview in Baker Street, into revealing its whereabouts. Several years ago, I contributed to this debate by proposing Mrs. Hudson was the author, based on the fact that whoever did write the adventure had to be privy to the colloquy between Silvius and Sam Merton that took place, at least initially, while Holmes was in fact in another room in his bedroom setting up the gramophone. Other than the two principals, only a person secreted behind them curtains could have overheard and hence recorded what they said. And we know that Billy the Page and Watson, were not there at the time. And, I just admire that. And, of course, I've defeated his purpose completely.
Well, this is an audio program. That's all right.
By laying that out for you. But I think it's important to do that to remind you all about all this stuff that accrues around Mazarin Stone.
Yeah, so back to the main portion of the paper. Mike continues. In an attempt to help resolve ongoing debates, William S. Baring Gould saw fit to dedicate an entire chapter to those arguments in his 1967 annotation. The conclusion, and one that's been widely accepted, is that the Mazarin stone is nothing more than an awkward and generally unsuccessful reworking of the Crown Diamond, or An Evening with Sherlock Holmes. And this, of course, was written by Watson's opportunistic literary agent, Arthur Conan Doyle. It was a one-act play. It first appeared in the Coliseum Theatre in London for 2 weeks in May 1921, before being revived for a third week in late August and early September. The clumsy and apparently hasty prose reworking then appeared in that October's issue of the Strand magazine. And its theatrical genesis leads many to disavow its canonicity, but the fact is that until conclusively proven otherwise, the Mazarin stone remains a bona fide case. And therein lies conundrum number 2. We know precious little about this adventure's time and place in the canonical continuum. All that the unidentified third-person narrator tells us is that it occurred at 7 p.m. of a lovely summer's day. No day, no month, no year is mentioned, thus compelling would-be chronologist to start from scratch. Take that, chronologist. But by certain references, canonical and otherwise, there can be little doubt that the Mazarin stone takes place late in Holmes's career. Baring Gould, for example, assigns it to the summer of 1903, thus making it the penultimate Baker Street case, with only the creeping man intervening between it and Holmes's retirement.
While we don't have to accept Baring Gould's dating, vague as it necessarily is, as definitive, it's certainly instructive that the 13 chronologists profiled in the book The Date Being, a compendium of chronological data, are unanimous that the case hails from the twilight of Holmes's active career. Watson is once again out on his professional own, and has been taken for quite some period, of time, perhaps even years. His place has been taken, as much as it could be, by Billy the Page. Or, as the narrator recounts it a bit more prosaically, with a quotation, finally, his eyes came round to the fresh and smiling face of Billy, the young but very wise and tactful page, who had helped a little to fill up the gap of loneliness and isolation which surrounded the saturnine figure of the great detective. Well, let us pause to consider this ostensibly offhand introductory observation, especially in light of the portrait of Holmes that emerges from the rest of the narrative, flawed as it may be. Does the Holmes that both Watson and the reader are about to meet again after a protracted absence really come across as being lonely, isolated, saturnine? If anything, it appears that the Holmes who struts but frets not his 20 minutes upon the Strand stage is a particularly energetic and vivacious one who is more than adequately compensated, perhaps even overcompensated, for the cessation of Watson's established companionship by throwing himself headlong into his own, truly singular, as in independent, life.
For starters, we find him deeply engrossed in a case, so much so that he's again neglecting his health. We also see him in full possession of his theatrical talents for disguise and dissimulation, and still indulging, if not actually improving upon, his impish habit of practical joking with that celebrated stiff'un, Lord Cantlemere. We see him sociable. He offers Watson a drink, a smoke, the use of his customary armchair, and entertaining, not only to the mercurial count, but both the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister as well. And we can deduce, based on the presence of his recently forged rapier-like acerbic wit, that he's been sharpening it on the whetstone of polite society via regular social intercourse, clearly a volte-face from his early bohemian days. In addition, we see him surrounded by his personal passions, such as the violin, and his personal indulgences, the gasogene and his lamentable tobacco, all in the comfort of his untidy room. And last but certainly not least, we see Holmes reaping the financial rewards of his years of professional labors. He has the latest in modern conveniences, an electric bell and a gramophone. He can afford to hire Tavernier, the French master waxworker, instead of a journeyman at the nearby Madame Tussauds. He can pay for the creative redesigning of his now Watsonless suite. And he can afford the services of a full-time page without having to rely upon his former roommate's half share of expenses.
Does this sound like a man whose very personality is ebbing along with his professional career and is in danger of actually going out with the tide? I think not. If anything, we find a Holmes who is not only completely in charge, as we would expect, but the very antithesis of lonely, isolated, and saturnine, a domestic situation that Watson apparently does not expect to encounter, as evidenced by his erroneous spoken supposition that Holmes himself has joined Billy and the suite in remaining unchanged. Now, what might all this portend? It might just mean that, contrary to the narrator's apparent preconception about how poorly Holmes must be doing without his live-in Boswell, this latter-day Holmes is actually faring exceedingly well without him. He might even be deemed to be positively thriving. And though I don't wish to be alarmist here, I must, in the interest of speculative truth, point out that it is entirely possible that it was only after Watson moved out once and for all that Holmes was able to truly blossom as an individual. Lending credibility to such an unsettling conclusion is the pathetically phlegmatic portrait of his relationship with Holmes, with which Watson initiates the creeping man, which, according to Watson himself and all the major chronologists except John Hall, occurs, quote, early in September of the year 1903, that is, within weeks of the Mazarin Stone.
And here we have just an excerpt from that, which I will read. The relations between us in those latter days were peculiar. He was a man of habits, narrow and concentrated habits, and I had become one of them. As an institution, I was like the violin, the shag tobacco, the old black pipe, the index books, and perhaps others less excusable. When it was a case of active work and a comrade was needed upon whose nerve he could place some reliance, my role was obvious. But apart from this, I had uses. I was a whetstone for his mind. I stimulated him. He liked to think aloud in my presence. His remarks could hardly be said to be made to me. Many of them would have been just as appropriately addressed to his bedstead, but nonetheless, having formed the habit, it became in some way helpful that I should register and interject. If I irritated him by certain methodological slowness in my mentality, that irritation served only to make his own flame-like intuitions and impressions flash up the more vividly and swiftly. Such was my humble role in our alliance.
Now compare this protracted self-deprecating assessment with the cheery, upbeat opening sentence of Mazarin Stone. Quote, it was pleasant to Dr. Watson to find himself once more in the untidy room of the first floor in Baker Street, which had been the starting point of so many remarkable adventures. As we soon find out, Watson has dropped in on Holmes unsummoned and unannounced, apparently while out enjoying that lovely summer's evening. Clearly, his intentions were to offer Holmes his compliments of the season in a nostalgic social visit, and he swung by Baker Street perfectly expecting to have been missed, if not actually sorely missed, by his former roommate and colleague. Alas, to his chagrin and mortification, he quickly discovers the exact opposite is true. So embarrassed is he by this epiphany, I suggest that for the very first time in his 20-something-year literary association with Sherlock Holmes, he cannot bring himself to serve as the first-person narrator of the Mazarin Stone, opting instead to relate the criminal denouement that he has serendipitously arrived just in time to observe in the impersonal third person.
Bolstering this conclusion is the fact that in the very next adventure to appear in print, The Problem of Thor Bridge, which was published 4 months later in February 1922, Watson seems to explain his recent auctorial reticence. Quote, "In some cases, I was myself concerned and can speak as an eyewitness, while in others I was either not present or played so small a part that they could only be told as by a third person." Apparently, the Mazarin Stone was just such a case, and Watson is only slightly, belatedly justifying its unprecedented and confusing narrative structure. In any case, it was a wiser but much sadder Watson who then took up his pen to chronicle The Creeping Man, the last true adventure with the best and wisest man whom he had ever known. Well, there you have it.
Yeah.
What are our thoughts on this?
Fabulous. Fabulous. You know, well, I mean, I hesitate to describe it so baldly, but it's the thinking, you know? It's, taking a look at it from a perspective that no one has done before.
Yeah.
And, I hesitate to use the word marshal, but marshalling, just a lovely argument. And the writing, of course, as you would expect from Mike, is just first rate. So it's just a lovely thing.
It is. I think we can always count on Mike to bring a thinking person's attitude to his papers. And he, if you've heard him present in person as well, I mean, you kind of get this from the print a little bit, but there's a jocularity about it. There's an underlying sense of whimsy and humor about it that Mike is kind of winking at us through all of this. So it's just a lovely gesture there. Well, we did promise you that we would throw some names into a hat here, and so we do. We will bring out the big prize wheel and give it a spin and see who is going to win a back issue of the Baker Street Journal as it slows down and lands on number 94. Number 94. My goodness, I got to go all the way to the bottom of the spreadsheet here, and that looks like it belongs to Diana Williams. Diana Williams. I see the column was small, so it was Diana Will. Diana Williams, you win a back issue of the Baker Street Journal.
Hooray!
So we will have that off in the mail to you, and thank you for being a supporter. If you would like to join the likes of Diana, well, you can. Just go to Patreon or Substack. We have the links in our show notes. So wherever you happen to be listening to us, just check the show notes and click that link. It'll send you right over to our Patreon and Substack pages. Pick whichever works for you at whatever level, And we thank you in advance. And in the meantime, I suppose we will close the books on this month's Morley Montgomery Award-winning episode and wish you well, which is really just a trifle.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Please join us again next week for another installment of Trifles. Show notes are available on SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and be sure to check out our longer show, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, where we interview notable Sherlockians and share news of the Sherlockian world.
You've taken my breath away, Mr. Holmes.
Watson, we must behave ourselves.